So, good morning class. Sorry for my voice because I am pretty sick right now. So, let's start with our discussion. So, for today, we're going to discuss what is poetic form. So, poetic form is a structure or pattern that a poem follows. So, it includes its rhyme scheme, meter, and overall organization. The form of poem affects its rhythm, tone, and how its message is delivered. So, when we say poetic forms, it is a poem, and a poem can take many forms, so it depends on how they are written. So some poems can rhyme, some can tell a story, and others can express emotion. So each poetic form gives a different rhythm, tone, and feeling. So today we're going to explore the 6 common poetic forms that we've used in our life. So first is the rhyme. So rhyme, it follows a rhyme scheme, usually within or at the end of a poem. So when we say rhyme poetry, it is following a specific rhyme scheme, and it creates more a musical and rhythmic flow that makes them more enjoyable to read and much more easier to remember for our readers. So for example, the sky is blue, the clouds are white, the sun is shining warm and bright. So as you can see, the rhyme word was white and bright, which is exactly sound the same, and it is put at the end of our poem. So next is elegy, which reflects on death or a loss of a person. So when we say elegies, it is a reflective poem that express grief, loss, or mourning. So they often honor someone who has died or convey deep emotion of sorrow and remembrance. So for example, remember your smile, your gentle face, gone too soon yet full of grace. So, as you can see, there's still a rhyme words at the end of the poem, but the idea of it is morely focusing on the loss of a person or how that person has lived when they are still alive. So next is ode, praises a person, an object, or an idea or an event. So when we say ode, it is a poem of praise or admiration. So it expresses deep respect and appreciation for an object, event, or even an idea. So for example, ode to the sun that warms the day, your golden light leads the way. So in this example, we praise the sun just like what the ode is all about. Next is preverb. So it lacks consistent rhyme scheme or meter. So when we say preverse, it is a type of poem that do not follow a rhyme scheme or a meter. So they sound natural and conversational, allowing the poets to express their ideas more freely and creatively. So, for example, the rain falls slowly on my window, a calm whisper of the morning. So, as you can see, there's no rhyme scheme at all. It is as if the poet or the writer is just talking like normally. And next is narrative. It tells a story. So, when we say narrative, it is a poem that tells a story through a verse. They include characters, settings, and plot, blending storytelling with poetic language. For example, once a brave knight rode through the storm to save his home and keep it warm. So, as you can see, this example is about a brave knight. So, a brave knight that rose through the storm. That way he can save his home and keep it warm. So next and last type of poetic form is lyric. So lyric tells about feelings and emotion. For example, trends to have musical quality. So when we say lyric poems, it focuses on expressing personal emotions or feelings. So it shows strong emotion. So they are often musical in tone and convey moods such as love, joy, and sadness. For example, my heart dances with the sea breeze, free and wild, full of peace. So now that we're done with our poetic forms, let's now proceed with how to listen properly to a poetry. So According to Annie Finch, in listening to poetry, poems survive because of their musical quality. So, if a poem doesn't sound good to the ears of a person or its listeners, it will not survive till this day. So the rhythm and sound patterns make them like song. So hearing poems read aloud adds emotion and deeper meaning, letting listeners feel the poem, tone, and experience its life and character in a new way. So remember that before writing was invented, poetry was part of a oral tradition. So when we say poetry, it is not before, it is not written. Instead, it is only done orally. So here are some tips on how to listen well to a poem being read or recited. First thing you need to do to listen properly on a poem is do an initial reading of the poem, meaning you must read the poem first before you listen to it. So read it once or twice to give you an idea of its content. Do this so you can have impressions, feeling, and thoughts about it. So according to our first step, before you listen to a poetry, you need first to read it. That way you can have an idea on what's going to be the poem is about. That way you can have an expectation when the poet starts reading it. So next is, as you listen to someone reading or reciting, think of the experience as if you are listening to a simple story being told instead of a complex piece of art. So according to our second step, when you listen to a poet reading their poetry, you must not think of it as a complex piece of art. Instead, you imagine yourself as if you are in this story that is being read by the poet. And next is suspend. Interrupting the poem or analyzing its form or elements. Listening to poetry is about hearing the voice of a persona come to life as if the persona is personally conversing you. So in poetry, there is the character which is the author. So when you are listening down to them, you must not interpret the poem and analyze its form or elements. Instead, you focus on the person, on what they are saying. So you imagine as if the person or the character is talking to you instead. Now that we're done with discussing on how to properly listen to a poem, let's now proceed in how to read it aloud properly. So, reading aloud or reciting a poem is another skill. Getting into character is a good way of doing it. To read the poem with appropriate emotions, you must first understand the persona of the poem. So, according to this now, when you are reading aloud a poem, you must get into the character or you must be the character itself. So, on how to do this, these following questions may help you. So, first, who is the persona? Sino yung nagsasalita or sino yung main character? How would you describe the persona? So, is she tall? Is she beautiful? Is she handsome? And etc. What is the background of the persona? Where does he came from? And next, who is the persona talking to? Who is the receiver of the poem? And next is, what is the persona feeling or why? Is she feeling shy, in love, embarrassed, and what is the reason for it? So, when you read a poem aloud, you give it a voice and emotion. To do this well, you need to understand the speaker or the persona or the character again. So, you must, again, understand who they are, what they feel, and who they are speaking to. So, you must read it with the right tone, pacing, and emotions to help you and your audience feel the poem's meaning. And remember, when you're reading a poetry, that poetry is a powerful when it is read aloud and it can be understood with sincerity. So, to recite well, you must understand the poem deeply and not search for a correct meaning. Former US poet Laureate Billy Collins created Poetry 180 to encourage school to read one poem aloud each day, making poetry a living and a relatable part of our school life. So, how can we read a poem aloud properly? So these are the 4 tips that you may follow. So first, you read the poem slowly so that it can be clearly understood by the listeners. So you must read it properly and read it slowly. That way, your listeners can understand it much more efficiently. Next, read in a relaxed and normal tone, doing away with dramatic or theatrical way of speaking, meaning you must not exaggerate your expression or emotion. Instead, do it relaxedly with your normal tone. So next, follow posing as suggested by the punctuation marks, not by lines which can make your reading choppy and can interfere with the flow of the poem. So, alam mo naman natin na ang poetry have stanzas. So, you must not pause at the end of it. Instead, follow the punctuation mark. That way, the flow of your reading is much more smoother. That way, it can again easily be understood by your listeners. And lastly, read with conviction. For unfamiliar words, it is best to look for their meaning and pronunciation. So, if the poem contains a lot of hard words to pronounce or meaning or words that is not familiar to you, you must first understand those words and do some research. That way, you can do it much more properly. So, reading poetry aloud can also be a powerful. According to Mark Yakich, an American poet and creative writing professor, your ear will pick up more than your head will allow. The ear will tell the mind what to think. So, that's our discussion for today. So thank you for listening, and again, sorry for my voice. Due to me being sick, I am not able to properly speak. So once again, thank you, and please study because next meeting we're going to have our quiz. Thank you.